Hi, this is the Weird Christian again, and not gonna be as organized as I should be, but I'm gonna be talking about the fellow who wrote this book. It's Mystery of Capitalism. It's Hernando de Soto. He's a Peruvian who has some ideas. The reason why I'm going to be talking about this is because I wrote this book, The Spirit of Capitalism. It has some premises that kind of, well, it contradicts is mostly all the economic theory that you're going to hear. And it actually contradicts this ideas of what capitalism is about and law is about and all these things. But I was talking to my brother, and in criticizing my book, which is this one, he just says I don't really know enough and I should read this book, which I read. The thing is, and people, you have to have good premises to start with, and you can make your logical conclusions about what's happening. And this is my whole thing: is you have to have a solid or robust premises. Now, if your premises aren't robust enough to begin with, and that's the idea, is you've got to have robust things that really work in the real world if you want to try to make them work. And so if your premises aren't robust enough, or they deny certain things of reality because you just don't want to accept certain realities, well, then you're not going to get the right assumptions to begin with, and from there on, you're not going to make the right logical conclusions, statements, and get to the logical conclusion. So, and I find that's what happens in a lot of arguments. So now my brother, he was always saying that capitalism is about greed, and that's not what really this is about here in this book. It has nothing to do with that. But anyway, and I say that no, capitalism is about fulfilling needs. That's the whole thing. And if capitalism was about greed, then all you would have to do is what socialists do: is you get in power and you steal from everybody. Okay, you make up fake policies, and then you throw a bunch of money into a number of companies and charities, and then you siphon all the money back to yourself. Maybe like you might put the accounts out of the country, and then go back and use those assets that you made up because you're a government. You can make fiat currency and go buy back the country that you're basically stealing from the people in the country. Okay, so I mean, if that's your motive, then that's what you would do. If your motive is just greed, that's what you would do. That would be the easiest, the most legal way of doing it without because you are the authority, so you can't actually be thrown in jail, right? So you can, and then you say, oh, it's inflation. It's inflation. But really, it's you stealing from people, their wages, their savings, so forth. And it's been going on for a long time. That's how government's been working. Basically, it's a criminal system, and they make it legal to be criminals. So that's, anyway. So, but I'm not sure. Anyway, my brother gave me this book, and this guy presents, some ideas. He doesn't really define what capitalism is. He says a mystery of capitalism, but never really defines it. But he does issues about, how to make people. His concern is how come capitalism works good in certain countries and then doesn't work very good in other countries. Mostly, how come it works good in Western countries and not so good in other countries? And this is a real concern, actually. And people don't really understand the reason why, because people like Adam Smith says, oh, it's just an invisible hand. They have no idea what's going on in capitalism, really. They can talk about, mass production of nails or something, and, a little bit of, loaning and banking, but to actually understand why and what capitalism is and what is the foundation of it, they don't know. And you get people like, Ludwig von Mises and Ayn Rand. They love the idea of, people having freedoms and rights and stuff, but they don't know what gives people this idea of freedom and rights and what gives this idea of rule of law. They like the form of capitalism, but they don't really know what it is. Okay. And, and they, capitalism worked really good in certain countries and not so good in other countries. And it's really because what is the spirit of it? And people like Max Weber would talk about, the Protestant work ethic and all this. Well, that is not really what makes capitalism work. Protestant work ethic doesn't do that. You can have people that work really well or really hard, and they won't have a capitalist system. They could be slaves for all that matters. So, so that's not what makes capitalism. And I don't know why my brother gave me this book to talk about it, because it really doesn't talk about the issues that I was dealing with. It doesn't talk about what makes capitalism. And a mystery of capitalism, he doesn't really he doesn't really understand. The only thing this fellow says, Soto, he says is that you need to give the basically underground economy some legitimacy and property value and record it so that you can give it some legal rights in the other economy. Basically, that's what he's talking about in this book. And it's got some really interesting things that I didn't know about historically, which I found very fascinating. Like, people talk about the native Indians being thrown off the land, in the American West. Well, he talks about all these people that came from the other, from Europe, came onto land, and people like Washington, through the law or whatever, legally got huge estates, like the state of Virginia or something like that. I mean, like big estates, like huge tracts of land. They weren't on them, they weren't using them or anything like that, but they had the right to them. But all these people that were basically squatters came onto their land and started making even hamlets, and farming and stuff like that, before Washington could even get in there, right? With any kind of whatever, because he didn't, you're only a person, even Washington's only a person, he doesn't have, 10,000 people, working for him, whatever. So, so then they had to deal with all these squatters and how much, they could give people, and basically a lot of times they had Washington and the U.S. Army had wars against settlers or people coming in trying to make a living, coming in and just using the land. Nobody else was using it. Why not them? And, and probably treated just as bad as the natives were. You don't hear their stories, maybe because they're all dead. I don't know, or many of them are dead. Just like they killed the natives, they killed these guys too. So, but they started forming some kind of legal thing, and people started getting land. Places like in maybe Kentucky or something like that. You hear about these hillbillies. They just did that kind of thing, and since nobody wanted that area, nobody paid any attention to them, and they kind of eventually got their land just because they sat on it long enough. Possibly, I don't know. In Canada, where I'm from, for land, basically the Crown owns all the land. It owns all Canada. And then they made treaties with the natives. But that's not native land. The treaty actually states that it's not their land, it's the Crown's land. So all this stuff that we're on native land is all bogus. According to the legal systems of Canada, we're all on Crown land. Even your own property is on Crown land. And they give you rights to use different things on Crown land. Like, no Canadian actually owns their land, really. You don't really own it. The reason why I'm not doing, a specific talk and getting all written up on things, and trying to compare it to mine, because it doesn't really compare to what I'm writing. My brother just that's what happens. People throw things at you, and so you have to digest all sorts of ideas, but they're not ready to actually talk about these ideas. I have my ideas of what goes on. I just want people to understand what I'm saying. They don't have to agree with what I'm saying, but just understand it. I mean, they're not necessarily going to agree with what I'm saying. But to me, the biggest problems in the world today is not really about, what is capitalism. That's not really the biggest problems of the world today. The biggest problems is that people do not understand the proper relationship with authority. And it's been going on for a long time. People don't, and my big beef, I simplify it down, even though I've studied a fair amount of history. I simplify it down, and the basic problem in the world today is that people under the system and people controlling the system, they all believe that the office is above the law. So that means that the office makes laws, and they just make laws that are convenient for themselves. Okay? Not that the law is above the office. Okay? And that you have to stick to your word, and you don't change your word just arbitrarily. So, because people have an idea that authority is absolute and infinite, they tend to, when somebody says something in any office of authority, they just believe it. And they don't question it. They don't find out if it's consistent to their own rules. They do none of that. And that causes a problem. And, some people think that they have a proper understanding of authority. But I found, like even the English system, which has been a conflict between those two principles, whether the office is over the law or the law is over the office. Okay, there's a contradicting in England. That's been a problem being fought over for hundreds of years. And it seems that the concept that the office is greater than the law has overcome the idea that the office is under the law. Like in the Magna Carta, you get more of the office is under the law. Okay, but in the Westminster system of laws, you get that the office is greater than the law. Okay, so, and in documents like the Westminster Confession, is in British tradition, and that is, basically it's a imported idea from France, the Norman idea, and that is where you have the idea that the office is greater than the law. So you can just change the laws to suit the office's whims, basically. And that's the way the British Commonwealth has been running their government, especially of late, where they've been very tyrannical. You know, they still have some shadow or some wisp of the idea that they're supposed to be under the rule of law. Like they do a lip service of it, and then they pay no attention to it beyond that. And you can see it all the time, like almost, it seems, daily. So if you can't see it, I'm not sure if I want to go through all, like, even a very common one. Okay, I'll just take the very common one, you know, making the Emergency Act. They never followed any of the law that they had. They just said that their office is basically over the law. Okay. Some people call that corruption. It is if you're saying that you believe in law and then you don't pay any attention to it. That is corruption. You know, but the problem is that certain people in power don't really believe in law. They believe that they are the law, which means that the office is greater than the law. So it doesn't matter. They can do whatever they want. And the system has allowed them to do that. In fact, the Canadian system has allowed that to happen. It was set up that way. It was set up to be where, well, for one thing, a foreign power would basically control it, which is the Crown or England. And then you'd have a small area that would have kind of local control over what's being said by the Crown or by the foreign power. So they'd be kind of like to do the will of the Crown. And now that we don't really pay that much attention to the Crown, you have other foreign offices taking control. Like, for example, Mackenzie King was, before he became a prime minister, he worked for Rockefeller, made about $15,000 a year in the 1920s. Then he came to Canada. Well, he was a Canadian. He went into Canada, became the prime minister, long-lasting. He lasted as a prime minister for more than 20 years of rule. So, and he was still in charge, you know, during the war, the Second World War. So at that point, it was the Rockefellers controlling Canada, a foreign power controlling Canada. He kind of switched from being from England, instead it was from Rockefellers. Okay. And, you know, if you want to look at, that's just a very obvious point so that you can see what I'm talking about. I mean, I could go to talk about, you know, welfare and I don't know, Pearson, Trudeau. Anyway, you can go on and on about who is actually, you know, and with the foreign power is controlling. We're basically a puppet state. You know. Anyway, and it's been set up like that ever since John A. Macdonald set it up like that. So, you know, that's our system. You know, that's the way it is. So, anyway. See, I was going to go and talk about, you know, Soto. You know, I found when I read Wikipedia, it did a good summary of, you know, his book. He's got other stuff in here, you know, about his life. He was quite involved with, but here's his main thesis of his books and so forth. And when I read it, it presented the book well. I thought it presented this book well when it was read, when I read the book. So, you know, if you want to get a summary of what is going on, it really doesn't have a lot to do with what my book is about at all. But anyway, I thought I would just present it out. I like to have dialogue, but I don't like when people just give me a book and then say, read it, and, you know, and then they think that they've done the argument, like, to me, or discuss things, like, it doesn't feel very satisfying to me, and I feel like I'm working in a vacuum, so I'm not going to put any more effort into you know, presenting his book. Maybe, maybe some of the problems that he has, and things that he doesn't address, that he needs to address if he really wants to help solve problems of poor the society, whatever. That's De Soto kind of that's what he wants to do. And the problem is that we have a lot of people that think that the way to do it is to micromanage society. And I'm not sure. It sounds like De Soto is kind of in that. He wants to record everything, even the underground economy or the black market. Like, he wants to record everything, and then they can have legal recourse. Well, the problem is that one of the problems, in a way it's a good idea, in a way it's a bad idea, because if you don't have the legal foundations to actually have a proper legal system, then you're just basically getting control or information of all their stuff, but you're using it for your own ends of the government or whatever, rather than for making people have right relationships with one another. And that's what law is about, is to make people have right relationships with one another. It's not about controlling people. It's to make sure that when they do agreements and when they do things, they have their responsibility set up and people can abuse one another. That's basically what law is supposed to be about. But the other people have ideas that law is about control and micromanaging. Okay, and you tend to get that in certain cultures, and De Soto doesn't, he doesn't want to talk about cultures, but to me, cultures are the things that establish the law. And if you can have any laws you want, but if your culture is completely different, your laws mean nothing. So culture is super important. What people think, who they are, who their God is, how to relate one another. Those are very, very, very important. And I think the thing is to have the right relationship with God and understand who you are and understand who other people are. If you have a right relationship and all that, then that is how you establish a proper, I'll call it a kingdom, a proper way of living, a proper place. And the thing is that even like I have a high regard for Christianity, much more than I do have for Buddhism and shamanism and Taoism and all that kind of Hinduism, Islam, and the present form of Judaism. I have much higher regard for Christianity, but, and this is a big but, I think, I'm a Christian, I think that most Christians don't understand their religion, and they don't understand their God, they don't understand who they are, they don't understand law or sin, and you see that in documents like the Westminster Confession. And people believe that document, and when I look at it, to me, it's like anti-Christian literature, okay? So, but anyway, I'm not going to go into that right now, but I'm just saying Christians have a big problem because to me, they don't even understand who God is. And maybe I'm just not, I don't know. I've talked about these things before, but it seems I would like to talk to other people about these ideas. If you want to listen to my other videos, you can go to my YouTube channel, and my videos are in idea section, and you can go into that and look at the ideas. I mean, it's not just about religion, some other ideas and different things. It's not that well organized, but I have topics about what I think about, and Though this book, you won't be able to get it. I did print out some, but I'm the publisher, and I'm not a very good advertiser and publisher. I don't push my book. I have another book that I wrote, Out of the Cave to Become Man, and it doesn't really deal with capitalism, but it does deal with, understanding the world and what's going on. It's that's not this book. It's this book here. And you can get that on Amazon, probably for real cheap. But anyway, and it's readable. It's not the work of art or anything like that, but it's readable. And maybe some of the ideas are harder to understand, or I'm just a writer. I'm not the greatest writer, but I just try to present ideas. I have ideas that I think are important for people to hear. And anyway, I'm just kind of rambling on now, but I just want to leave that with you. I wasn't really planning to really go into big detail about this, because I'm just not getting, I'm not getting the feedback that I want. I can't actually even contact my brother much, except if I write something up and send a, snail mail to him, because he's pretty well keeps himself out of the internet in a sense. But I just thought I'd do this thing and put it out there. I don't know who's going to listen to it, and it doesn't really, I don't really, unless I get comments, I don't get comments. So, I don't get people really trying to talk to me, but that's okay. This is for me. If you don't want to be involved, that's fine. I'm not really upset. I'm just doing it for myself, trying to get my ideas on thoughts about what to do next with this stuff that people give me these books to read. I could probably, I don't know, I don't think anybody reads, like these topics are kind of too heavy for most people and they don't want to talk about that kind of stuff. And so I'm not really that worried about it. But anyway, I'm going to put this on anyway, and you could read this. You can look at some of my other things. I've talked maybe a little bit about my book in one of my talks. If you ever wanted to talk to me, you can make a comment, and we'll see. We'll go from there. But that's all I'm going to say today. Thanks for listening.